What's up, cool people? I'm Matt Conroy. Welcome back to some more Bible reading. So, we are in Genesis chapter 18 this time. Recently, God has promised Abraham, because now, last chapter, there was, a name change kind of signifying God's promises, in essence. Not only for Abraham, but also for his wife, Sarah. And there was more kind of conversation almost between God and Abraham that, yes, Sarah will in fact have a son of yours. So, that's kind of where we're at the moment. So, Genesis chapter 18, verse 1. I better get going with this. This is not exactly a short chapter. So, the Lord appeared again to Abraham near the oak grove belonging to Mamre. One day Abraham was sitting at the entrance to his tent during the hottest part of the day. He looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed them, bowing low to the ground. Okay. Not sure if that was more so just like friendly greeting kind of thing, or if like he recognized that they were some kind of special or whatever. I don't know. In any case, Abraham is at the very least just being cordial or respectful to these men that are coming. So anyway, verse 3. "My lord," he said, he being Abraham, "if it pleases you, stop here for a while. Rest in the shade of this tree while water is brought to wash your feet. And since you've honored your servant with this visit, let me prepare some food to refresh you before you continue on your journey." "All right," they said, "do as you have said." All right, so again, could just be that Abraham is recognizing that these people are important, or he's just, really polite, realizes it's a really hot day and is like, hey, these people have been walking out in the heat, in the sunlight. Maybe I'll help them out. Maybe I'll, give them some water and a bit of rest and shade. Anyway, verse 6. "So Abraham ran back to the tent and said to Sarah, 'Hurry, get 3 large measures of your best flour, knead it into dough, and bake some bread.' Then Abraham ran out to the herd and chose a tender calf and gave it to his servant, who quickly prepared it. When the food was ready, Abraham took some yogurt and milk and roasted meat, and the roasted meat, and he served it to the men. As they ate, Abraham waited on them in the shade of the trees." Okay, so he's... It seems like he's, just kind of helping them out as they're on their way, at least in his mind. Because he knows he has a lot of things, and maybe he's not as sure how much these travelers have, so he's like, hey, all right, let me help them out. Not only give them, some shade and some water, but give them something to eat, to give them, replenish their energy or whatever. A little asterisk next to the 3 large measures. Okay. According to the math that it gives here, it says about 22 liters of flour. That seems like quite a bit. But, I mean, when you have guests, a lot of people will make more food than is necessary when they have guests over, because they're like, oh, better not, leave them hungry or anything. Anyway, verse 9. "Where is Sarah, your wife?" the visitors asked. She's inside the tent, Abraham replied. Then one of them said, I will return to you about this time next year, and your wife Sarah will have a son. Sarah was listening to this conversation from the tent. Abraham and Sarah were both very old by this time, and Sarah was long past the age of having children. So she laughed silently to herself and said, How could a worn-out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old? So, I mean, we saw in previous chapters that Abraham had some doubts about having a son in his old age. No surprise Sarah would feel the same way. But these visitors say that she's going to have a son within the next year. Now, they're probably thinking that these are just visitors who, maybe mean well or something, but like, I doubt they assume that these visitors have any greater knowledge of the future than they themselves do. So, I mean, it's even easier then to just kind of laugh it off and be like, yeah, right. But, verse 13. Then the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh? Why did she say, Can an old woman like me have a baby? Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return about this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. And Sarah was afraid, so she denied it, saying, I didn't laugh. But the Lord said, No, you did laugh. Okay, so here it's saying the Lord. So it's not just the visitors talking to them now. It's like God is like, well, it might sound crazy to you, but what this guy said is correct. You really shouldn't be laughing at this. It's not a joke. But, people are people. They like, sometimes we know in our heads that God can do anything, but at the same time, we kind of think to ourselves, okay, well, what's truly realistic here? And just because it could happen, does that really mean it's going to? I mean, come on. And so that was probably part of what Sarah was thinking. But when you realize that it's God saying something, then it has a little more weight to it. But anyway, verse 16. Then the men got up from their meal and looked out toward Sodom. As they left, Abraham went with them to send them on their way. So, Abraham just being polite here, kind of escorting his guests as they go on their way. But anyway, verse 17. Should I hide my plan from Abraham, the Lord asked. For Abraham will certainly become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. I have singled him out so that he will direct his sons and their families to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. Then I will do for Abraham all that I have promised. Okay, so God has a particular plan that he's wondering whether to hide it from Abraham, maybe in part because he thinks, Abraham might get himself into some danger. I don't know, but further clarifies, the importance of Abraham, and that seems to have bearing on why God would want to hide his plan from Abraham. Anyway, verse 20. So the Lord told Abraham, I have heard a great outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah, because their sin is so flagrant. I am going down to see if their actions are as wicked as I have heard. If not, I want to know. The other men turned and headed toward Sodom, but the Lord remained with Abraham. Abraham approached him and said, Will you sweep away both the righteous and the wicked? Suppose you find 50 righteous people living there in the city. Will you still sweep it away and not spare it for their sakes? Surely you wouldn't do such a thing, destroying the righteous along with the wicked. Why, you would be treating the righteous and the wicked exactly the same. Surely you wouldn't do that. Should not the judge of all the earth do what is right? Okay, so I'm just trying to understand, because this makes it seem almost like the Lord was one of the visitors, or was at least noticeably present along with the visitors. It's just, I'm just trying to make sense, because I always got the sense from this that God essentially was one of, if not all of, these visitors to Abraham's house, just because of how, just because of the simultaneous nature of his word and their presence. But it doesn't outright say that God was any of them, so maybe his presence was just kind of there at the same time. I don't know. I guess there are some moments like that where, you kind of feel God's presence, or you hear from God in the midst of a situation. So that could be what was going on here. I was just trying to make sense of it, but we know God is, essentially everywhere, but maybe that wasn't necessarily the thoughts at the time of writing this, or I don't know, but maybe that's part of the reason why it seems odd that it's talking about, the visitors leaving, but the Lord staying with Abraham, as if his presence would have moved elsewhere. But in any case, so yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah were both, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah were doing evil things. But I think Abraham is essentially trying to plead for Lot's case, because that was where that's where Lot was last time that we knew, in Sodom. That was where he got captured from when there was the whole war amongst the kings. So, in any case, God's planning on, seeing what's going on there. And if it's truly as evil as people say, then he's going to wipe out Sodom and Gomorrah. But then Abraham, probably recognizing that Lot is there, is like, well, what if you find some people that are still good? Are you gonna wipe out 50 good people along with, all these evil people? That doesn't seem fair. So anyway, verse 26. And the Lord replied, "If I find 50 righteous people in Sodom, I will spare the entire city for their sake." Then Abraham spoke again. "Since I have begun, let me speak further to my Lord, even though I am but dust and ashes. Suppose there are only 45 righteous people rather than 50. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? And the Lord said, "I will not destroy it if I find 45 righteous people." Okay, so Abraham's like almost negotiating, it sounds like, with God. But I think it's him recognizing that Lot lives there, and he's trying to give Lot as much of a chance as possible to see, or to, you know, avoid destruction, essentially. So, I don't know if it's... I think it's more so that Abraham is, you know, concerned for Lot's sake than it is Abraham just trying to really nitpick and be like, oh, well, I mean, what if this many people are righteous? Or will you destroy the city then? Or, oh, what about this many people? But this is going to go on just a little bit longer. Let's see here. I believe I stopped at verse 29. Because, okay, then Abraham pressed his request further. Suppose there are only 40. And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it for the sake of the 40. So he keeps knocking down the number of righteous people required, air quote, for this judgment to be avoided. Verse 30. "Please don't be angry, my lord," Abraham pleaded. "Let me speak. Suppose only 30 righteous people are found." And the Lord replied, "I will not destroy it if I find 30. Then Abraham said, "Since I have dared to speak to the Lord, let me continue. Suppose there are only 20. And the Lord replied, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of the 20. So, I'm noting this whole exchange, and I realize, you know, Abraham is being like kind of apologetic for being almost, you know, so bold and daring as to continue making these requests. I don't know if they're requests, but like for kind of almost testing out God's judgment. I mean, of course he's apologetic because he doesn't want God to be angry with him. But at the same time, like, you wonder where the limit is on this. And I wonder if maybe that's what's going through Abraham's head too. He's kind of like, I've never really had, you know, a quantity of, you know, God's judgment, for lack of a better way to put it, in any situation like this. I now that I've got this in front of me, I really kind of got to know, like, where's the limit on this? Because, I mean, I'd be a little curious about that too. So, you know, maybe that's what's going on here as well. Maybe it's not just him trying to help Lot out. I mean, it could be both. But anyway, verse 32, I think, is where we are, because we got to 20 already. So, verse 32. Finally, Abraham said, "Lord, please don't be angry with me if I speak one more time. Suppose only 10 are found there." And the Lord replied, "Then I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. And the Lord had finished his conversation with Abraham. He went on his way, and Abraham returned to his tent. Okay, so 10 was kind of where they ultimately settled, because it's like, Abraham's probably like, we started with 50. Like, if I go lower than 10, that's just craziness. There's got to be some kind of, limit to how many people God would save. But, yeah, again, I think there might be a mix of, Abraham, A, trying to, keep Lot safe, and B, kind of wondering, about God's judgment and how far God would go, in terms of reserving his judgment. Makes me wonder how many people lived in Sodom at the time. But I'm sure if we had those numbers, then we would try and, overly quantify God's judgment and be like, oh, we need X percentage of people to be righteous or else the world is doomed or something like that. And that's not something that we really need to know or should know. So, yeah, anyway, that does it for this chapter. Surprise, surprise. Coming up, we're going to get into God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah, whichever way that happens to go. But yeah, so Abraham has visitors. God promises Sarah will have a son. God mentions his plan on, judging Sodom and Gomorrah. That's kind of the Cliff Notes version of what happens in this chapter. So, yeah, that's going to do it for now. I don't really have any additional thoughts to add to this. Kind of already said everything that came to my mind, regarding this chapter and what happened in it, and, my thoughts connected with any of that. So, as always, like the video if you enjoyed, share it with others if you want them to see. Make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell to get updates when I post new stuff. I have way more than just this Bible reading that I'm doing on my channel. So if you're interested in seeing what all else I put on here, do that. Follow the things, including social media stuff, which information on that's down in the description below. And of course, leave comments down below all that with any thoughts that you have on this or other video ideas or whatever you have. So, that's it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you for the next video, or at least the next chapter of this. But whatever the case is, until next time, stay cool, people.